If you don't have a lot of experience working with audio, you may wonder what makes a professional recording sound so different than one you record at home. Well, obviously there are a lot of factors like the quality of your recording space, your microphone, and so on, but one characteristic that gives a recording a more professional sound is compression. Raw audio recordings generally don't have a uniform volume level. Some sections are louder than others, and some sections are quieter. When listening back to some recordings, you might feel like you have to constantly turn the quieter parts up and the louder parts down. For example, look at the waveform for this file I have open. This is a file called Sing Real Loud, which is available in the exercise files. Now, even before I play this, you can tell that some parts are louder than others. In fact, I'm going to make the track a little bit taller so you can really see the difference. And before we listen, I'm going to drag the level meters here out on their own. And I'm going to make them vertical and a little bit taller there. And this will make it easier to see how loud the loudest parts of the recording are. So as you can hear and also see, there's a significant dynamic range between the four phrases of the performance captured in this recording. This is due to the way the singer performed the song, and there's no fault in that. You don't want to ask a singer to be less expressive, you want to capture a good performance. The problem is that the quieter parts of the recording may get lost in the mix if you start adding in other instruments. Or even if this was meant to be an a cappella performance with no other accompaniments or instruments, you'd still want to do something to slightly decrease the dynamic range within the recording so the listener doesn't have to turn up the overall volume just to hear the quieter parts, or turn down the volume so the louder parts aren't too overbearing. What compression does is it evens out your audio levels. With good compression, you can listen to a recording of someone both whispering and yelling, and you won't have to turn the volume up or down. You'll be able to hear both parts equally well. So let's take a look at Audacity's compressor by going to Effect, Compressor. Now this may look very technical and off-putting at first, but once you learn how these sliders and settings work, it's really not too bad. Probably the most important setting is Threshold. This determines how loud the audio has to get before the compressor starts working. In fact, let's cancel this for a moment and play the audio, and this time watch the level meters and see how high the level goes.
Sometimes I sing real loud, sometimes I sing real soft. Sometimes you hear my voice, at times I trail right off.
So the blue line that you see here indicates how loud the track was. And you can see that at its loudest, it reached just about to the -9 dB range. Now you don't need to know about the decibel scale right now. Just know that 0 dB, right here at the top, is the loudest you can go without introducing distortion to your recording. But this recording at its loudest is about -9 dB. And the quietest parts of the recording only came up to the area between -24 and -27 dB. So let's go back to the compressor. Now that I have the knowledge that my recording goes up to about -8 or -9 dB, I want to make sure the threshold is set somewhere below that. If I set it higher than the loudest point, the compressor won't kick into action at all. So a threshold setting of -15 dB or so would affect the louder portions, but have no effect on the two softer phrases, since neither of them go louder than -15. Now we saw that the quieter portions of the recording got to about -24 dB, so I'm going to set the threshold to -24. Therefore, anything louder than the quietest parts of the recording will be compressed. Alright, so the threshold determines when the compressor actually compresses. But how much it compresses is determined by the ratio setting. The ratio determines how much any signal over the threshold is attenuated or reduced, and it's usually expressed as a larger number over 1, or a ratio. Right now you can see the ratio is set to 2 to 1. Now the higher the ratio, the more severe the compression. A ratio of 1 to 1, for example, has no change. A ratio of 2 to 1 reduces the original signal by half. A 4 to 1 ratio reduces the signal to a quarter of its original amplitude, and so on. Generally, a setting of about 2 to 1 to 4 to 1 is common. Anything higher than that is often considered more extreme compression, but where you set your ratio is really going to depend on your recording and what you're trying to achieve. Now, because there's such a wild degree of difference between the loud and quiet parts of this recording, I'm going to take this up to 8 to 1. This is something you'll have to experiment with on each recording. Next, we have the attack time, and that determines how quickly the compressor reacts when it detects a signal that goes above your threshold. And the release time slider is for specifying how quickly the compressor lets go of the signal and returns it to its uncompressed state after it detects that the audio is no longer above that threshold. Too long an attack time and the compressor may not compress the louder signals quickly enough. Too long a release time and the compressor effect might be applied to quieter sounds that don't need compression. Again, it's something you'll have to experiment with based on the recordings you're compressing. I'll just leave those default settings for now. Now you might have noticed that I skipped over the noise floor setting. This is mainly useful when compressing speech, as it can help to make sure the background noise isn't amplified if the speaker pauses for a few seconds. If you're hearing the background level come up during those pauses, you can try increasing the noise floor level. And down here at the bottom we have makeup gain for 0 dB after compressing, and with that checked, it boosts the audio to the highest level of 0 dB. I'm not actually a fan of that setting since it leaves you absolutely no headroom if you have to make other changes later. Now, compression does usually reduce the overall volume of audio, since it's reducing the loudest parts. Many compressors and other programs usually have a gain slider, so you can determine how much louder you want the results to be. I usually like to set it to about -3 dB or just under 0 dB, which gives me a little bit more headroom. We don't have that option here, so I'm going to leave this unchecked for the moment. I'm also going to leave compress based on peaks unchecked. It bases the threshold and gain adjustments on the peak values of the waveform. I'm just going to rely on the settings I've made with the sliders here instead. So really, all I did here was adjust the threshold and ratio settings. Let's click OK and see what we got. So right away, you can see the waveforms are much closer together size-wise now. The quieter areas were left untouched, but the compressor has reduced the louder areas. Let's listen and keep an eye on the level meters.
Sometimes I sing real loud, sometimes I sing real soft. Sometimes you hear my voice, at times I trail right off.
So it sounds much more even now, but you can still hear the dynamics in the actual performance. The singer sings both loudly and quietly, but I can hear both levels equally well. Now I do in fact want to increase the overall volume of this recording now, because the compression reduced it. I could undo the change and go back to the compressor, and here check makeup gain for 0 dB after compressing. And as you can see, that makes everything louder, but again, I don't like making things quite that loud.
Sometimes I sing real loud, sometimes I sing real soft. Sometimes you hear my voice, at times I trail right off.
So you can see here in the meter that that takes the level right up to the very top, right before the clipping point. Let's undo that again. And I'm going to reapply the compression without the makeup gain. So we're back to this point. And instead, I'm going to apply another filter by going to Effect, Amplify. Here I'm going to set the new peak amplitude to -3 dB and click OK. So that's increased the overall gain of the track, but not to quite the extreme level the compressor was using. And to me, this is a much more manageable level.
Sometimes I sing real loud, sometimes I sing real soft. Sometimes you hear my voice, at times I trail right off.
So I have plenty of volume now, and I still have a little bit of headroom here to work with. It's not taking the volume all the way to the very maximum. And at this point, I've been able to successfully compress the dynamic range of my audio and also increase its overall levels. And I think we have a much better and more professional sounding recording now.